My guests are teaming up to help improve financial readiness in the military community. Here to talk about the 2020 Active Duty Military Veterans and Spouses Financial Readiness Survey is Darlene Goins from Wells Fargo and Bruce McClary from the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, aka the NFCC. Darlene is Senior Vice President and Head of Financial Health Philanthropy for the Wells Fargo Foundation. Bruce is Vice President of Communications for the NFCC, where he provides marketing and media relation support for the organization. Here is my chat with Darlene and Bruce. Darlene and Bruce, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation. I love a little bit of research. I'm a super dork that way. And especially when it relates to money and the military. But I want to start it off with what exactly is the 2020 Active Duty Military Veterans and Spouses Financial Readiness Survey? I read it because it's a mouthful. I wanted to make sure I got it right.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the program, Lacey. I really appreciate it, and it's great to be here, especially to share this information. The NFCC Financial Readiness Survey of active duty service members, spouses, and veterans, it takes a look at the specific issues, financial challenges, and opportunities, and concerns, and financial behavior of the broader military community, the military household, and veterans, just to see where things stand in comparison with the general population and to help identify key issues that might be unique to active duty service members and their spouses and veterans as well, to help us address those issues and work together to find solutions. So that's the gist of the survey. And of course, Wells Fargo sponsored the survey and made it all possible. And Harris Poll conducted the survey on behalf of NFCC, and it was fielded last fall, and we got the results in the fourth quarter, and now we're able to share those results. And so we just don't, in terms of the results and the questions that we're asking to look at the financial lives of military households and veterans, we're also not just asking what's happening, we're also asking why things are happening, why certain things are happening with regard to financial readiness and the military. And I think that's where the real value exists in this survey, is the fact that we're digging a little bit deeper on key critical matters and asking the important questions that help lead us to solutions for some of the challenges that exist.
How often do you all do the survey?
Well, there's a little bit of a fractured timeline there. We started in 2014 at the NFCC, and we conducted a survey of active duty military service members and veterans. Those were the two groups that were surveyed in 2014. And that was initially just a one-off. And we kept hearing from a lot of the people that we work closely with who support financial readiness in the military community and had been using that data, including Darlene. We would hear from people who said, wow, this is really good data. When are you going to go out and do another one? And after hearing enough of that, we finally realized that, yes, that is data that's valuable, and it's been long enough since the last survey that we should probably go out into the field again and do that. So in 2019, that's exactly what we did. We did it a little bit differently. We approached it differently. Instead of looking at active duty service members and veterans, we looked at military households. So we included spouses, which we thought was key in getting a complete picture of what financial readiness looks like in the military household. So we're really proud of what we were able to accomplish in 2019 with the survey. And then building on that in 2020, we added the veterans back into the survey to make it an even more complete look at the military community, veterans and active duty, plus the spouses as well.
It's all in the title, because it really is all about the service member, the spouse, and the veterans, because they all have financial concerns that are in that military community, but they each have unique circumstances that I think separates them in some way. So I think asking each of them directly what's impacting them is really important. I want to know, Darlene, Why is Wells Fargo supporting this? Like, what does it mean to them to find out this information and maybe find solutions for the military community as it relates to money?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on your show, Lacey, and for the question. Wells Fargo has been helping military members and veterans succeed financially for nearly 170 years. So, our support for this survey is really a part of Wells Fargo's ongoing commitment to military members, their families, and veterans through various initiatives to help them navigate life's career transitions and really address all of their financial needs and lead to ongoing financial success. And we recognize that service in the military brings with it unique financial needs and challenges. And so this survey really helps us better understand what those challenges are so that Wells Fargo can think about what are the right supports and initiatives and programs that we can then provide to help our military families be successful. And we've had a long collaboration with Nfcc. This is one of many collaborations with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. We have funded the Sharpen Your Financial Focus program with a focus on military, and our Hands on Banking program, which is our free financial education program. That's been a component of that. We've also worked with other nonprofits in this space, such as Guideposts, where we publish and distribute critical information around financial readiness, the blended retirement system, veteran entrepreneurship to military members and their families around the world. And we offer other programs such as home donations and payment-free vehicles for combat wounded veterans.
Mm, I love that you guys are looking towards solutions because it's one thing to say, hey, we got all this information and found out some people are struggling. Well, that's great, but what are we going to do to solve that struggle for people or frustration? Because some of it's not necessarily a crisis, everything. And we're going to get into a second what's in this survey, but that there are ways that small tweaks that people could make to maybe improve their financial life, and finding out the information first so you can take action, I think is the key. So you're not just throwing a dart at the dartboard and think like, what might they like help with, or what, just guessing.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, I want to ask this first, Bruce. What was in the survey? Like, what was the good? What was the bad? Hopefully, it wasn't all bad.
Yeah, it's there's a lot in the survey. We really tried to pack a lot in because we wanted to take as comprehensive a look at the financial life of military families and veterans, and we wanted to also create some alignment with the general population survey that we also conduct during the year, so that we could have some kind of a basis of comparison. Here's how military families are doing in comparison with the general population, which includes mostly civilians. So we really packed a lot in. We look at debt, we look at savings, we look at financial concerns, we look at all kinds of things, and including the impact of COVID and the pandemic on the financial lives of the military, which I think, being a unique aspect of last year, was something that we absolutely wanted to work into this to see where there was that impact, what military families felt about that, and how prepared they were or weren't to face those circumstances. So you said there might be some good and some bad. There's a little bit of both, but I always ask, you want the bad news first or the good news? I guess we'll start with the positive news, because I think this is something really good. And I think there were areas where the military families really stood out in comparison to the general population. I think one area that always catches my attention is the area of savings and the focus on retirement. And I think that's to the credit of DoD and all of the attention that's been given to establishing savings, paying yourself first, understanding the blended retirement system, making the most of your options for retiring with a solid financial safety net and getting a good start. So, no complaints there. I think that the members of the military families should be proud of where they are with progress in savings. The other area that goes back to what I mentioned relating to COVID is that 3 out of 5 service members and veterans said they felt prepared to deal with the pandemic. So there's a level of preparedness, a confidence in that level of preparedness that exists across the military spectrum. And the one thing that is interesting about this is that they credit their military careers as being helpful in making them as prepared as they possibly could be under those circumstances to face something like this, something unforeseen, and having a significant impact on their lives. So on the positive side, I think that's one thing there that we can look at and say, wow, that's something that's really good for the military community. On the other hand, more than half of the service members, 54%, say that they're just getting by financially this year, which is an increase over 2019. I say this year, I mean in 2020, which is an increase over 2019, where only 43% indicated that they were just getting by. And we'll talk about some other things that come out of this survey that indicate that military households are living close to the edge when it comes to their budget, and they're needing to look elsewhere to either bridge the gap if there's a shortfall, or to do better than make ends meet. But that's one of the indicators that caught my attention, because we always talk about the general population. There's a certain subset living paycheck to paycheck, having to struggle in that way. And we're seeing that same thing play out with the military community, especially service members, with more than half saying that they're in that category. Then add to that the issue of borrowing. And I know we're going to get into this in the discussion a little bit later, but more than 3/4 of active duty service members borrowed money over the past year. They took out loans. And while on the surface that may not be concerning, because it's okay to borrow money, that's part of a healthy financial diet, if you will, and managing debt is perfectly normal.
Like if you're going to get a car loan or a
Yeah,
mortgage.
if you're going to get a car loan, if you're going to get if you're going to borrow to get a mortgage for a house, those kind of things, student loans, whatever. But there was a lot of borrowing activity, and especially in some of the categories that we might define as being toxic, less healthy types of debts. So that was an area of concern too. And that specific part, and that's really the worst part of this, is that about a third of active duty service members have taken out a cash advance or paid a loan, compared to only 13% in the previous year. So you're talking about 31% versus 13%. That is a massive surge year over year when you're looking at data like this. And it really begs the question of why these individuals are deciding that a payday loan is the best option for them in that moment, knowing that payday loans are often accompanied by very high interest rates and a lot of fees, and they become problematic and difficult to repay, and in some cases create a cycle of debt that's difficult to get out of. So this is probably the most jarring piece of information that can come from this survey at all, and it's certainly one that we're focusing on. But again,
and was that active duty, or was that veterans and spouses, or was that specifically for active duty, that 31%?
That's active duty. That's active duty service members. Yeah.
That's a steep jump.
Yeah, and I think just to add one positive thing, so we don't end on gloom and doom.
Yeah, let's keep going back and forth, Bruce.
The other piece that I think was very positive is about veterans. It was reassuring to see that veterans had a greater level of confidence in their financial security, that across the board, this is just the broader picture of their situation, that things seem to be stable and a little better for veterans. They had a little bit more confidence in the financial choices that they were making. In fact, so much so that they offered advice in the responses that they gave to help service members, active duty service members, improve their financial readiness at that stage in their life, just based on the lessons that these veterans had learned along the way. So that was another encouraging thing as well.
That is, because getting out of the military is hard, and a lot of veterans get behind because they're used to different income, they're used to deployment money, they have medical coverage. There's a lot of factors that go into it when they get out it's a hard hit for some people. So I think that's wonderful that they're giving back to say, hey, if I could tell myself, 10 years or 20 years before how I would get right before I get out, that's wonderful that they're giving that advice.
Mhm.
Darlene, why do you think there was such a big jump in that payday loans? Not just, again, we'll clarify, not just like get a car note. We're talking about payday loans.
Right. I mean, COVID-19 and its economic impact on millions of people in America are far from over. And unfortunately, the military community is not immune to the devastating economic impacts. And many people are understandably under a lot of stress and anxiety. And for many people, this may be the first time they're having to navigate and access different types of government benefits. And clearly, we're seeing that the pandemic has created or amplified a need for credit for those people who may be facing gaps in income and need cash in hand to pay for day-to-day expenses, food, rent, utilities. And so, to Bruce's point and yours, right, what's concerning here is that military members are turning to payday loans, which have those high interest rates and fees compared to more mainstream affordable loans, or even loans from nonprofits or CDFI lenders, community development financial institution lenders. And so, in seeing some of this data and seeing some of the needs coming out of the COVID pandemic, one of the things that Wells Fargo did with our foundation is we actually gave philanthropic dollars to the Credit Builders Alliance Fund, which is an organization that has nonprofit lenders as its members. And they were able to give out zero cost, zero interest loans, small dollar loans, $1,500, $2,000, but oftentimes enough to get someone over the hump as they are facing financial hardships. And so I think what's most concerning with the survey results is that the military members turn to payday loans as opposed to looking at some of these alternative sources of credit, or even the military relief funds. That would have been a great alternative. So I would just encourage military members and their families to look at all different types of alternatives and not to just default to the most expensive one, which is payday loans.
Yes, for sure. Like if you're going to start at a low level, they're just jumping way to the top, way to the top. So, Bruce, what do you think? Why this big jump? Because I was thinking the military wasn't as impacted because they were paid this entire time. Do you think it has something to do with mil spouse income? Or was it just maybe that the grant level amount that you receive from one of the military aid societies wasn't high enough? Do you think some of those things played into it?
Well, there could be any number of factors here. I think you touched upon a couple of things with regard to supplemental income in the household, which is, I know, an issue that we're going to explore as well and was a significant issue in the survey. But then, the question about the military aid organizations, I know I'm bringing up something very controversial here. Honestly, I don't care. It's something that needs to be discussed. And it was brought up to me by some people who are associated with these organizations. And there's a lot of misinformation that's being propagated by these short-term high interest rate lenders about the process and where to start. And I think the information that's getting to some of these service members and their families is that you start with the payday lender, then you go to the military aid organization. And from what I've been told, they're being advised by payday lenders that the military aid organization will pay off their high interest loan. Well, that's not true. That's not
For
how it
sure
works.
not. Top of the list not to be paid.
Yeah, so it's deeply troubling if there's that kind of misinformation that's getting out there, because it's driving the wrong kind of decisions, and it's costing military families a lot when they could have these other alternatives that Darlene alluded to earlier with either the Credit Builders Alliance or with these military aid organizations. And if those aren't options, just going into a bank or a credit union and applying for a short-term loan. Those are all much more affordable options than going to a payday lender. And there's also another issue too, which I know is under examination on a case-by-case basis, but there are reports that some, not all short-term lenders, high-interest lenders, but some may not be completely compliant with the Military Lending Act, which is what restricts the interest rates on these loans for active duty service members and keeps them more affordable than they otherwise would be. And if you think about states where those loans are regulated, the payday loans, I'm sorry, states where they're not as tightly regulated, the interest rate on payday loans, and you've heard this, they're for civilians, they could be up to 300% or higher, the interest rate. So that's another area of concern as well. But I think that initially the reason that some of these families, the military families, are turning to payday lenders could be because income has taken a hit, supplemental income. And we know from the survey that about half of service members and about 2 out of 5 spouses have been making use of the gig economy, not just for extra spending money, but to make ends meet. This is for real, significant budget items, food, shelter, clothing, things that are important, fuel for the car. So, for those families that were not able to sustain those income streams during the pandemic, and their income streams may have taken a hit or completely disappeared, they may have turned to borrowing to fill the gap, at least in the short term, while they were trying to find some solutions. So that may be where we saw that surge in payday lending, because of the urgency of the situation, because of the immediate need, and because those loans are so readily available, and because we've seen in the survey results that the choice is to go to the online payday lenders. They're not just, it's not the old days where they're setting up shop off the base gate. Now
They
they're
still do
in,
that though. Let's, for the
well,
record, they still do that.
but now even worse, they're in the base. They're
Yeah.
inside the base gate because they're online and they're reaching families that way. So, being just off the base gate is actually, between the two scenarios, is almost better than being inside the living room of this family in need. So that's another area of concern.
I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's frustrating to me because I think it's almost like a teenager in a parent relationship to say, "Hey, we love you, we care about you, we're trying to protect you, take care of you, teach you to do the right things. Why are you listening to a stranger that doesn't have your best interests at heart, that isn't trying to protect you and take care of you?" And I'm like, that's a lot of times what happens in the military community with money, is to say, "Hey, you can come on the installation. We're not trying to upsell you. It's free help. We'll give you grants. It may not be the full amount. We're not going to, let you keep going and charging stuff on your Target card and keep bailing you out. We're your parents. We love you. We're going to teach you, lessons." And I feel like, and then they go to these payday lenders that all they want to do is rob them blind. They make it very difficult for them to understand it. I always ask people, do you have the paperwork? Do you have any documentation of this loan that you took out, or what the terms are, and they don't know any of those things because they don't give them that information, or that gets buried in the information online or paperwork. And so it's frustrating that
Mhm.
there's these free resources, people, that the credit unions, places like that want to help and do it in a responsible way. But I think it's also misinformation that is told to say, "Oh, hey, those people on post don't know what they're talking about." They may be a financial professional, but not in my eyes, because some person I know that knew somebody that went to the office didn't get good help. So it's
Well,
this rumor mill.
and the individuals who borrowed from payday lenders, and this is an area where we actually took a deeper dive and we asked the question, why? What information did you have that led you to make this decision? Why did you go there instead of going to these other choices? And I think that was it provided information that in the back of my mind I kind of thought I knew, but it just confirmed some of what's actually happening. And they're being steered to the payday lenders in some cases by members of their own family, people they trust, who come to them and say, Sally at the payday lender was really super friendly. You got to go down there and talk to her because she can take care of you right away. So it's things like that. It's customer service experiences with these payday lenders, whether they're online or in person, and it's coming. It's leading people through the doors of these payday lenders just because of the other experiences. And it doesn't have anything to do with the expense of repaying the loan, the difficulty in doing so, whether or not the interest rate is fair. A lot of it is just it's bad advice coming from people that you might otherwise trust, your family. It could be your spouse, it could be your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, saying that they had a good experience. So that's another area where I think we as financial professionals who are concerned and focused on financial readiness in the military community might be able to do a better job to try to reach the military community with the right messages that encourage them to shop around, encourage them to ask questions, and encourage them to give themselves a little bit of time to make the right decision instead of being rushed in or feeling that they don't have time to think this through. And I think in some of these cases with the payday lenders, there is that sense of urgency. And don't think for a second that the high interest payday lender is telling the person to take as much time as they need and think about it before they do it. So I think it's up to others to reach these service members, their families, and even veterans, and just let them know the right way to go about making a financial choice that's better for them in the long run.
Yes, and they go to the aid societies. I've seen them. They give you the check right there. They give
Yeah.
you the money right away. And I'm sure Wells Fargo, if somebody goes in, that alone happens very quickly. That's all electronic.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, in the survey, you mentioned it, some information about military spouses moving to the gig economy. Is it also service members moving to the gig economy?
Yeah, it is. It's so about half of the service members, 51%, say they're making use of the gig economy, and for spouses, it's just over a third of the respondents saying that they made use of the gig economy. So it's actually more service members than spouses are making use of the gig economy, according to the survey, to fill that income gap in their household. And this could be a variety of jobs. They could be doing, they could be doing delivery driving in the evening, or consulting work, or handyman work, whatever they're doing to fill the gap. But that just underscores the fact that the pandemic certainly hit a lot of these households very hard in circumstances where that particular career track, that side career track, might have been shut down or restricted because of the economic impact of COVID. And but there's also an upside to the reliance on the gig economy. And I don't want it to sound all negative because we talk about it as filling a need. But I think there is some benefit in certain situations. It's a little bit of a flip side to that scenario, because it allows you, when you're transitioning out of active duty service and your household is moving to full-time civilian status, it almost creates a little bit of a soft landing, because in some cases you have a spouse who's been relying on the gig economy and they've developed a specific skill set. Maybe they've even pursued certification or professional credentials in that field of expertise. And that could be a steady income stream during that period of adjustment that can help add to the financial stability and the soft landing, moving to civilian status full time. So I think there is, a positive side. There's certainly an upside to having that gig economy focus in the household. But it's also very important because it's filling a need in specific households where military income alone isn't enough.
Yes, I saw that insight as positive and negative. Darlene, what did you think about that? Because sometimes military spouses don't want to work. Maybe their spouse is deploying, or they're getting ready to move. And this, like Bruce was saying, might fill a gap. Do you think the same way, Darlene, that it could be, or maybe it's more one than the other?
I think there are positives and negatives to the gig economy. I mean, just the fact, though, that active duty service members might be turning to the gig economy or taking a second job is alarming, right? They need to be focused on serving our country. But the gig economy has provided a lifeline to a lot of people during the pandemic. And even pre-COVID, military spouses and partners often had a hard time maintaining and retaining employment because of the frequent moves that come with service in the military. So, the gig economy offers flexibility in terms of the type of work, the hours, the schedule. It could be an entry point into entrepreneurship, but it does have its challenges, right? You may not have control over the rates that you're paid, depending on how you're participating in the gig economy. You have to be responsible for paying your income tax and Social Security and things like that. So there are challenges, and actually, Wells Fargo has a lot of great tips for people who are engaged in the gig economy on wellsfargo.com. Just a lot of things to think about as you are weighing the pros and cons around engaging in the gig economy.
I love that because it can be helpful, but you want to know what you're walking into and make sure that you're making good money at it and versus compared to the time that you're putting into it. I know that I'm biased because I'm in entrepreneurship, so I want to go ahead and tee that up and be honest. But I think it's exciting, the gig economy, compared to like when I was on active duty and growing up as a military kid. These opportunities to start testing things. So I think for, let's say, somebody that's interested in baking cakes or interested in photography, and they're starting to do that as a side hustle in the gig economy, they're starting to see, hey, is it something that I want to do full time? Is this something that I really do have a passion for versus I thought I liked it, but that was only like a 6 month like thing I was going through. Instead of getting out and making this full commitment, I am now a professional photographer. And then to come to find out like you didn't like it. So I think that part is interesting, that military spouses and service members get to test the waters.
Yeah, it can
Exactly.
be a bit of a laboratory, experimental in some way.
Yeah.
But yeah, and if you think about it too, there's a lot greater risk if that's all you're relying on. If you're only relying on your income from the gig economy, there's no other income stream. You're less likely to kind of experiment a little bit like that because you are, you know, it's a little bit safer when you've got that steadier, that other income stream.
Yes. Plus, you start to get used to the financial parts of it because you got to pay your taxes, you got to manage that money. So, there are some things in entrepreneurship, if you're used to getting a steady paycheck every 2 weeks, like you are on active duty, you might want to get familiar with if nobody hires you, you don't get paid.
Right. The income inconsistency is one of those
Yeah.
drawbacks, right? It's one of those challenges with the gig economy. And so you've got to figure out how to manage through that.
Yes, I highly recommend checking out the Wells Fargo tip sheet on gig economy before you get into it. I thought in I want to know both of your opinions on this in the survey that maybe some things that could be seen as negative maybe helped other things turn positive. For example, Bruce, you mentioned right away that savings is up, that people, maybe in the veteran community, do you think that maybe this gig economy played a part in people building up their savings? And maybe it wasn't just going to get by. Maybe people are actually trying to get ahead and get prepared for unexpected crisis that's going on.
Yeah, again, it could have, I think the gig economy could have very well played a role in some military households in helping those families get ahead on their savings goals, in particularly short-term savings, being able to have that safety net for financial emergencies. I just keep thinking back to the time, it seems like a million years ago, but it was in 2019 when there was the furlough of federal employees, and we saw how quickly people's savings dried up and how quickly people were starting to fall behind on their financial obligations and look for even food assistance and things just only weeks after their last paycheck. So this situation with the pandemic, for those military families who may have been able to sustain or even grow their activity in the gig economy, it certainly would have given them an opportunity not just to put aside money for short-term savings, but also to pay down debt. And we've noticed that in the general population with a lot of people making significant progress, paying down their credit card debt, paying down their loans, getting balances under control that may have been at risk of delinquency or getting close to falling behind or falling into collections. So in that area, that's tremendously positive. And I think the gig economy may well have played a role for some of those military families. But again, it's a tale of two cities. On the flip side, those who were adversely affected by the pandemic, whose secondary income streams may have dried up, they may have actually had to plow through whatever savings they had just to make ends meet or fill the gap and then turn to borrowing.
What do you think, Darlene, that it maybe was positive that the gig economy helped build up some savings, down some debt? Because I did see that in the news that a lot of people were taking the opportunity to get out of debt. Do you see that too, Darlene?
Yes, we're definitely seeing a trend where debt being paid down is happening at like 3 times the rate of savings in some of the data that we're getting back from our grantees. So it's really incredible to see the focus that people have put on paying down debt. In terms of savings, I don't know if it was the gig economy or other things that led to such a high savings rate, but I'm thrilled to see that. I think the pandemic has really shown us the importance of emergency savings to be able to have that buffer against unexpected financial shocks. But I also liked that I saw that 93% of service members were saving for retirement. And I really credit the Department of Defense's blended retirement system as providing more ways for military members to really save for retirement.
I love that. I thought that the blended retirement system, a lot of people thought like, oh, this is like something we got to talk about. There were so many, and I mean, I gave so many presentations on the BRS that, make your eyes turn. I had it memorized, but it really brought financial planning concepts to the forefront. So before this, the BRS and the change in the retirement system, I don't think there was these discussions. It was kind of like, save your money, don't go into debt. It wasn't like, hey, you should put that into long-term savings, and your TSP is long-term savings, and really explaining what those things are. And if you save for this long, this is the future value of that money. Do you think that played a part too, starting to really bring people's literacy in financial planning up?
Oh, absolutely. I think it did play a role. Just having to be aware of options and really think through the trade-off decisions involved. I think it definitely probably heightened people's awareness to the need to plan financially as you think about both short-term goals and long-term goals.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think the drumbeat has been steady. The DoD has been on point with messaging. All of us in the periphery of that discussion who've been contributing in any way have been chiming right in as well. So I think, again, I think it's put service members and their families in a very good position to be doing as well as they can be with making the right choices when it comes to saving and retirement, and taking action to make sure that they're moving forward and making progress.
Yes, 93% is an awesome number to talk about saving for your future self. I always say that in your earning years, you're earning money for two people, for yourself and your 85-year-old self. And if you're not putting the money away right now, your 85-year-old self is not going to like the food they're eating or the roof that they are under. It's not going to be an environment or quality of life that they want. And so to hear 93% is really awesome. But there's also social proof in this whole survey, is to say, hey, I'm not saving for retirement, but it sounds like most of my peers are saving for their retirement. So
Mhm.
maybe I might want to jam on that.
Absolutely. I love that. Can I steal that?
You can.
Yourself today and your 85-year-old self. I love that.
Yes, but that's really what it is, because I think, most people were in the here and now. And I like to just call myself out too. I was that way when I was young and enlisted. I get it. Like sometimes you're just self-centered, just focused on the here and now, like having a good time, and you're off duty, you want to do, spend some of your money, those type of things. But you really do have to have this awareness. And so I had a really hard time getting through to young service members. And I'm like, we got to get imaginary here. Like, think about yourself now. Think about yourself at 85. Like, what do you want that to look like? And right now, you're not going to have the money for 85 if you keep going through it the way that you're going now. So yes, feel free to borrow. You could say 86 and it'll be totally different.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely different.
Yes. Everybody will know that is yours. Well, this survey had a lot of great information. I can't stress the importance of the social proof too, because I have the benefit of talking to a lot of different people about their money, and you all do as well. Like, this is the world we live in. And so we hear or see what happens behind a lot of closed doors with money. but individuals don't see that. They don't know, hey, 93% of people are saving. A lot of people, are struggling with debt or whatever it is. But a survey result like this shows a clear picture of what's going on in the whole community, so you can better understand where you sit on the playing field, where you should want to play on the playing field.
Mhm.
And then which brings me to my next question is, why should people care about the survey? Like, what should they do next? How is it going to help the military community with financial readiness? Because I think we're all on the same page. It's important to us all. How can we make sure that we're making it important to them?
Yeah, my question in response would be, why wouldn't people care? It's, there's so much about this that is very, very relevant to a lot of different interests. I think the survey findings about the financial challenges and opportunities that affect the lives of those who protect and defend our nation, and the veterans who did so before. I think anybody in a position of work similar to ours, what we do to support financial readiness, financial well-being, should see this data as a roadmap to the solutions that exist for the challenges that have been revealed, and finding ways to help military families and veterans overcome those challenges. And that's everybody. And I just want to clear up, when I say all of us, that's not just banks and credit unions and lenders and advocates like yourself, Lacey, and nonprofits. But I'm also talking about, the DoD as well, and the different branches of the military, from the Pentagon right down to the remote radar station in Alaska. I think this data can be helpful. This survey can be helpful in doing just what I said. For everybody who's interested in this issue and helping military families, I think we can use this as a roadmap to work together to find ways to improve, to bring solutions to military families that help them deal with the problems in front of them and be better prepared to deal with the problems that are yet to come, and to build a strong, stable financial foundation for themselves, and to be sure and confident about the financial decisions they're making, um, so that we don't have to come back a year after this or 2 years after this and come back with, God forbid, a higher percentage for payday loans, or something like that. I mean, this is our opportunity to turn the ship around in areas where we need to, and to continue the drumbeat in areas where we're making progress and we're seeing good results, like savings that you just mentioned. So that's the way I see it. I think people should care about this because it is a clear roadmap to the solutions for some of the problems that exist in the military community and the community of veterans.
Darlene, what do you think about the survey and how it can improve financial literacy? And I mean, are there some things that we could do different, or things that we should really start hammering home because it's working?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Bruce. I think the great thing about the survey is that it really shines a light on the financial needs and experiences of military members and their families and veterans, and um, really underscores the importance of financial readiness programs and services that can help with day-to-day money management, thinking about how you handle borrowing and debt management, how you plan for the short term versus the long term, planning for retirement. I think anything that we can do to shine a light on those unique challenges is important, because it's going to take a collaborative effort to support our military families, right? As Bruce mentioned, it's going to be the government entities, it's going to be the private sector, corporations, banks, nonprofits, all of us working collectively, so that we can effectively and comprehensively really support our military families. And I think if there's any silver lining to what we see in the data, maybe now is a time that we are starting to see some of those structural barriers to the financial health and readiness of our military families. And, now is a time to really think about, how do we evaluate those structural barriers and how do we change them so that those barriers don't have to exist anymore.
Yes. I think the survey results if the Department of Defense is ever listening to me, just something that they should be keenly aware of to make changes, get all over the payday loan stuff in their messaging to say, hey, why are you guys going there? Why are you going outside the family? Why aren't you staying at home and getting the help from your parents versus going off post, going off base to people that don't love and care about you, and get on the messaging that, hey, no, we're here for you. You don't need to do that. You don't need to put yourself in harm's way, put your family in harm's way, and whatever that is. I mean, because I do think a lot of those organizations now are hiring military spouses. That's the other part that really ticks me off is, to come after your own, to cannibalize. That's a whole different ball game. But I think that, making it clear in that messaging with those results to say, hey, you don't need to get help from somebody that's trying to hurt you. I think that would
And
be
one
good.
thing I want to point out too is that, I mean, we're not, out there saying, hey, look at this, we got the best survey ever. But I think our survey is complementary to other surveys that don't have this specific focus. And in all fairness, I want to call attention to the status of force survey, the SOFS. That's conducted by the DoD, and it takes a look at some aspects of financial readiness. But again, we're taking it a step further in some areas and asking another layer of questions, or maybe we're taking a different approach. So again, I feel that this could be additive to the value that they see at the Department of Defense in their own survey in helping shine a brighter and more specifically focused light on some of the issues that might be uncovered there as well.
Yes, I do think it puts a spotlight on some things that we could work on, some things that we should celebrate and know that we're doing a good job, and we should keep this up, not change the behavior, keep that savings up, keep saving for retirement, those type of things. Darlene, what are some resources and support that Wells Fargo provides that can help with some of these issues to keep doing those good things and maybe help people that are struggling in other areas?
Sure. Well, ever since the pandemic hit and we saw how many people were struggling financially and just facing real hardships, we've been working on many fronts to respond to the crisis and help stabilize families. Wells Fargo, as well as other financial institutions, are continuing to assist our customers who are experiencing those hardships with things like payment deferrals and fee waivers and other support. So I would encourage anyone who is struggling at this time, don't be afraid to ask for help. Reach out and ask your financial institution for help. And then we also felt like it was very important early in the pandemic to connect highly trained and skilled financial counselors and coaches with struggling consumers, with struggling military members. And so we accelerated our funding to a number of organizations, nonprofit organizations, so that they could expand free virtual one-on-one financial counseling and coaching. We've heard that as many as 7 million people may need some sort of financial counseling to avoid bankruptcy as a result of COVID. So the need is very great. And the wonderful thing about working with organizations like Nfcc and all their member counselors and coaches is that they can look at that one-on-one review of a person's financial situation, help connect them with local resources for food, clothing, other benefits, help them create a budget that maximizes their current cash, thinking about various moratoriums that may be available where they might be able to defer payments here and instead put the money elsewhere, prioritize bills, negotiate with creditors, just the services that these financial professionals can provide are just so meaningful when you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious and stressed about your finances as a result of COVID. So we've definitely taken an approach of putting more of our philanthropic dollars to support that one-on-one virtual financial counseling and coaching.
I want to highlight that with like an exclamation point. That's so important because you could read stuff online all day long or talk, like watch this video, read something, but it's not specific to your situation. And that's so powerful, getting the one-on-one help to say, hey, I'm listening to your story, your unique circumstances, and providing solutions and support for those exact circumstances, not some random stuff, not for everyone, but for you. So I know all the nuances. And I think that's so important, not to mention just the logistics of getting it done, but the emotional stuff of that, to talk it out with somebody. Hey, this is my situation, and be heard is really important. It's a weight off people's shoulder when you're financially struggling, to really be heard by somebody. So I love that.
And to be able to do that in a setting where it's confidential
Oh yeah.
Right.
and you're not talking to your commanding officer, or you're not talking to someone else who, you may want to keep some things from, just, whether it's just out of embarrassment or just feeling like there might be a lack of privacy in certain situations. When you're talking to a counselor like those that Darlene described, it is confidential and it is that one-on-one advice. So you can feel confident not only that the advice you're getting is solid, but that it's just between you and the person you're speaking with.
Yes. What about the NFCC, Bruce? What resource? I mean, I know you also do one-on-one help, a lot of credit help. What are some resources people can use?
Yeah, the of course the NFCC is the largest and longest serving network of nonprofit organizations that provide financial counseling and advice to consumers, whether they're civilian or military. And we have a long history of serving the military, and Wells Fargo has been a tremendous part of support through that journey. And we have helped thousands and thousands of military families as a result of that support. And we provide access to free budget counseling. We provide access to credit counseling, to programs that are more directly assistive in helping people affordably repay the debt that they owe through our debt management programs. We offer housing counseling for people who are trying to preserve home ownership and avoid foreclosure, and also for those who are aspiring to own a home of their own, as many military families do. And so we offer that counseling as well. And we also offer student loan counseling, student loan repayment counseling for people struggling with student loan debt. And one thing that might be relevant to the military families leaning on the gig economy, we offer small business owner financial coaching. And you don't have to be starting a business up from the ground to participate. You can actually be someone who is participating in the gig economy to benefit from advice that's offered through this small business owner financial coaching program that's available with all the other services that I just described through nfcc.org. And because we represent a national network of organizations, I think that's the other thing that sets us apart, is that under normal times, again, I'm understanding the impact of the pandemic here, but there are community resources that are connected to the NFCC where you can talk to counselors in your own community and you can get advice, and you can even be connected to other resources that they're aware of through that touch point that are relevant to that's relevant to that community. But also our network serves people who are maybe a little bit more far flung and those who are in areas of deployment throughout the globe. When I was a counselor, I worked in the Hampton Roads area. And that, of course, has a tremendously high concentration of military, that. But I was also working with individuals who were serving overseas. And sometimes, we would connect by phone and we would conduct those sessions by phone. This was in the early days of the internet, but now we're able to do things a little bit more easily and securely via the internet. So it's not just serving military families in all 50 states, it's also all territories and areas where they might be serving overseas.
Yes, I love all those resources. Just makes it easier. It lowers the barrier of entry for people to, that may be nervous about going to talk to somebody about their money, knowing that there's all of these options and unique to your situation where you're more comfortable, like Wells Fargo, closer to home, NFCC, maybe some specific reason you want to go there. Like, you have options. You don't have to go again outside of the family to that stranger that doesn't have your best interests in heart. You guys are never going to forget that analogy. Really driving it home here. Well, I think that is wonderful. I want to ask you both, what is something that you found surprising about this survey, good or bad? I'll start with you, Darlene.
So before I tell you what surprised me, I mean, we've talked a little bit about some of the big surprises, but one more thing. I mean, I think if people don't feel comfortable with the one-on-one financial coaching and counseling, there are great self-service resources out there available, right?
That's a
If you
good
just
point.
want some financial education, we have our hands-on banking program, which is our free financial education program. It's non-commercial. So we're not going to talk about Wells Fargo products and services. It's just offered as a public service. And we have specific resources that are around PCS, deployment, career transition, things that are really specific to military life. So if you're not comfortable with starting with the one-on-one financial coaching and you just want to get some information, there are some great self-service resources out there.
That's wonderful. That's a very good point, because some people at first you're just trying to see what you need, where you want to be. And you're right. That is a great entry point for people. And maybe just that's your personality. You prefer it that way long term too. But
Right. It could be, right? We try to meet people where they are. But then turning to the surprises, I mean, the big ones, the high jump in terms of use of payday loans. And I think that, coupled with the fact that if faced with a problem related to debt, only 19% of service members said that they would turn to the military, which is down from 29% in 2019. And so I think those two dynamics really point to some structural barriers that exist that we need to try to find solutions to. And then I think the other big surprise was just the optimism. And it was a pleasant surprise. I think it was, over 50% of military spouses were optimistic that their financial lives would be better in the next 5 years. So a troubling finding, but also that optimism, that hope.
yes. And we could use some of that right now. Let's just be real honest. We could all use it.
Yes.
Yes.
In healthy doses. I would have to agree with Darlene on that last one. In fact, that was on my list. That was one of the things, the level of optimism was a very pleasant surprise. It's good to know that people are optimistic. Often when that's the case, it makes the recovery period from all this mess that we're dealing with a little bit better. So I'm happy to see that people are not unnecessarily more downtrodden than they need to be. And in fact, they're well above that in levels of optimism. But I think one area that stood out for me was the issue, and I'm putting my counselor hat on, because when I was a counselor and I was working with military families, a lot of times the couples would come in together, and things, when the discussion got into areas, that were a little bit controversial, there would be some sparks flying in those discussions, exchanges. And I think communication, that type of communication, was something that stood out for me. I was a little bit surprised to see that communication that leads to conflict was a factor in more than half of the, about half of the military households. So it wasn't, I don't think it was more than half, it was just shy of half, where discussions about finances would lead to some kind of conflict. And it's not that that's unique to the military. Good grief. I mean, talk to any couple, pick one. And I'm sure there've been arguments about finances. Show me
I
one
can name
couple.
a couple just in this household real quick.
I was going to say, show me a couple that hasn't argued about finances, and I'll, next to them is probably a unicorn and a rainbow. But it's so, I think that was one area. I think the amount of households that were facing that situation just seemed a little bit surprising to me. It was higher than I would expect. And then there was also the proportion of respondents who said that they feel like they're cut off or left out of the financial decisions that are made in the household. It wasn't a big percentage, but again, in military families, it's very important, because I know as a counselor, I was often dealing with situations of deployment where the household chief financial officer had the power of attorney and was making decisions on behalf of both parties in terms of when payments, what gets paid, when it gets paid. And I think if you're in that situation and you are running the financial ship of the household while the other spouse is deployed, it doesn't mean that communication doesn't have to take place, even if you're given full power and authority to make decisions on behalf of both. So I think that's a reminder, because I was, often in situations where that may have been the case, where communication was lacking, even though decisions were being made. And then when the period of deployment was over, the spouse would come back, and that's when sparks would fly, and there would be that conflict. So I think communication can solve all of that, but that was one area of surprise for me.
Yes, I think communication is definitely key when it comes to money. If you're not doing enough of it, it can cause mistrust and mistakes. But if you're doing a lot of it, then it helps avoid all of those things and make sure you're on the same page. I think that's so important. All right, I have got one final question for you. If you could tell a service member, a spouse, a veteran, people in the military community, one thing you want them to take away from the survey, what would it be? Ladies first, Darlene.
I would just say, don't be afraid to ask for help. There is help out there, whether it's with a one-on-one financial counselor, self-service resources, your military relief agency. Ask for help. We want to help support you through any kind of financial challenges that you may be facing.
That's perfect. What about you, Bruce?
Yeah, I think some of that is exactly what I would say as well. Reach out, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask when you need to. If there's something you don't understand, ask a financial professional. There are trusted financial professionals that you can access, whether you're reaching out to a bank like Wells Fargo and having discussions about how to manage your money, whether you're reaching out to the Nfcc at nfcc.org, talking to a nonprofit financial professional who can help you address specific challenges. Just reach out, don't wait. Do it the sooner the better. And the other thing I think is a good takeaway is aligned with some of the advice that was passed along to service members by one of the veterans that responded to the survey. And she's 60 years old, she's a veteran, and she said to her active duty younger counterparts that one of the best things that you could do right now is to plan for large purchases, be patient until you've saved enough to purchase, and pay your monthly bills on time every month. I think those things, planning and keeping up with your financial obligations, I think that's right in the bullseye. If you can take care of those things and you can plan ahead and you can be thoughtful about that plan and you can stay focused on your financial commitments, then you've won half the battle already.
I love it. That's a great way to round out the discussion, put a bow on it. I'm going to put a link to the survey in the description below. So if you want to read more about the results, see what's going on, please check it out. If you have enjoyed this discussion, please hit the like button below. Darlene and Bruce, I appreciate you being here and sharing these results. It's fantastic information to help the military community with financial readiness. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lacey.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button below and don't forget to subscribe to get all the latest videos coming out. This video was sponsored by the Nfcc in partnership with Wells Fargo. If you want to learn more about the Nfcc and Wells Fargo, you can find a link to them in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.